Anyone who's ever been around Nolan will tell you at social gatherings, he's taking videos, he's taking pictures, he's even come up to me when I'm getting ready to go to bed, hey Ma, come on, take a picture of me. You know, like that was Nolan. So that's why we feel that things may have been deleted.
The engines turn over one at a time as the light starts to fade. Coolers get packed. Anchors come up dripping. One by one, the boats swing their bows back toward the mainland and pull away from the sand. On one of them, there's a seat that should not be empty. Nobody counts heads. On a holiday beach with hundreds of people and dozens of boats, a person who's missing looks exactly like a person you simply haven't spotted yet. Everyone assumes he caught a different ride. Everyone assumes someone else has him. Someone else does not have him. By the time the last engine fades, a strip of dune and pine 10 miles from the nearest road, a place you can only reach by water, has gone completely silent. And an 18-year-old who came out here with people he trusted is no longer with any of them. Within 72 hours, his name would be everywhere. Within a week, the internet would split into two camps. One certain this was a tragedy, the other certain it was something worse. A video would go viral for all the wrong reasons. A photo would travel as proof of something it never showed. Rumors would grow so loud that investigators had to formally deny them. And underneath all of it, a family would keep asking one question nobody has fully answered. This is the case of Nolan Wells. Tonight we're going to walk through it the careful way. What's actually verified, what fell apart under scrutiny, and the questions that are still genuinely open. Because by the end of this video, you'll see that the real story isn't just what happened on that island. It's what happened to the truth afterward. One word before we begin. This case involves the death of a young man and the painful, unresolved questions around it. Some of it is difficult. Please take care of yourself as you watch. If you're new here, welcome. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We read every one. And to everyone who's been with this channel, thank you, sincerely. Every share, every like, every comment you've left has carried these cases to people who needed to see them. You're the reason this channel grows, and the reason stories like this one don't disappear quietly. Let's begin, not with the island, with the person. Part 1. The kid everyone points to. Nolan Xavier Wells grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a coastal town just east of Biloxi, known for its art galleries, its shrimping heritage, and on fall Friday nights, its football stadium. Football is where Nolan made his name. A standout wide receiver for the Ocean Springs Greyhounds, a multi-year varsity contributor, an all-region selection, the kind of player whose teams won region titles while he was on the field. But ask the people around him about Nolan, and the statistics come second. What they describe first is a presence. The upperclassman who pulled younger players into the fold. The teammate people wanted in the locker room. The most respectful kid in the building, according to friends who grew up alongside him. In early 2025, he sat for a signing day interview and announced he'd continue his career at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He called it a blessing. Most of his closest teammates were headed to college together. By the summer of 2026, he was a freshman receiver on the Smoks roster, studying general business, days away from reporting back to campus for summer camp. Hold that timing in your head. He wasn't drifting through a summer. He had a report date, a season, a plan with a calendar attached to it. He never played a college down. On the morning of July 4th, he got on a boat instead. Part 2. 10 miles of water. To understand anything about this case, you have to understand the place, because the geography isn't background. It's a character. Horn Island sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, south of Pascagoula. It's a narrow ribbon of sand dunes, pine trees, low marsh, and shifting lagoons, and it belongs to the Gulf Islands National Seashore, a federally protected wilderness. That designation keeps it beautiful. It also keeps it isolated in ways that matter enormously when something goes wrong. There is no bridge. There is no ferry line. There is no road. No marina. No lifeguard tower. No ranger station staffed around the clock. Cell service dies not far from the mainland. The only way on or off that island is a private boat, which means the moment your ride pulls away from the sand, you are entirely dependent on whoever brought you. The island has a long memory too. It's carried its name since 1699, when a French exploration party reportedly lost a powder horn during a landing. Over the centuries, it's been a cattle ranch, a lighthouse station, even a military testing site during the Second World War. And more than once, it has been a place where the Gulf simply took people. In 1906, a hurricane destroyed the island's lighthouse and killed the keeper, his wife, and his daughter. Their bodies were never recovered. But here's the thing, Horn Island's north shore is not remembered as dangerous. Barrier islands like Horn absorb the Gulf's incoming swell before it reaches the mainland, so the waters of the Mississippi Sound run calmer than open coastline. That calm reputation is exactly what draws hundreds of boats out every 4th of July. Families, teenagers, coolers, music, a floating festival on a strip of sand with no lifeguards and no way home except with whoever brought you. On July 4th, 2026, that same calm, crowded beach was the last place anyone can say for certain that Nolan Wells was seen alive. Part 3, the 4th. The morning was ordinary in every visible way. Nolan boarded a private boat out of the Ocean Springs area with a group of friends. One trip among thousands crossing the Mississippi Sound that day. By early afternoon, the island's north end was packed. Boats anchored along the shoreline, music carrying over the water, the holiday running exactly the way it always runs. Nolan was last seen on the island between 3 and 4 that afternoon. Accounts place him in conversation with a young woman he'd met that day. To anyone nearby, it was the least remarkable thing on that beach. 2 teenagers talking on a crowded holiday shoreline. It is also the last confirmed sighting of him alive. One more detail from that afternoon, and it's one we're going to come back to, because it ended up meaning 2 completely different things to 2 groups of people. His phone was not with him. It was on one of the boats. As the light stretched out and the afternoon wound down, boats began peeling off toward the mainland. Around 4:30, the boat Nolan had arrived on left the island. The reason on record is almost painfully mundane, a mechanical problem, an electrical issue with the bilge pump, the kind of thing that cuts beach days short every summer on the Gulf Coast. And this is the hinge the entire case turns on. By the friend's account, Nolan chose to stay behind, to keep talking with the girl he'd met, planning to catch a ride back with another group later. Nobody on that departing boat believed anything was wrong. Everyone assumed someone else would bring him home. His parents heard that explanation and stopped cold, because to them, it described a different kid. They've said publicly that separating from the group was completely out of character for Nolan, that he was raised, drilled, reminded over and over, you leave with the people you came with. And the accounts genuinely part ways right here. The young woman at the center of the friend's explanation reportedly told investigators something different, that she didn't know Nolan, and that the 2 of them had parted ways before he vanished. Sit with that carefully, because it's not proof of anything, but the one person the friend's story rests on describes that afternoon differently than they do. That gap has never been closed, and it's the first thread in a case that would soon have far too many. Part 4, the longest night. For hours, nothing seemed wrong, because nobody knew to look. A missing person on a crowded holiday looks exactly like a person who's simply somewhere else. By late that night, the explanations had run out. Nolan wasn't home. Nobody had heard from him. His mother, Christine Wansley, made the call no parent ever wants to make and reported her son missing to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Think about what that report actually meant in this case. Most missing person calls involve roads, neighborhoods, places a patrol car can drive. This one involved a barrier island 10 miles offshore, in the dark, with no lights, no staff, no cell coverage. A search area you can only reach by boat and only effectively cover in daylight. From the very first hour, geography was working against everyone. His father would later describe going out on the water himself in the days that followed, searching stretches of that coastline with people who knew Nolan, a parent doing with his own hands what no parent should ever have to do. Part 5, the search. By Sunday morning, July 5th, a mother's midnight phone call had become one of the largest search operations that stretch of coast had seen. It was never a one-agency effort. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office led it. joined by the U.S. Coast Guard, the National Park Service, and the volunteer United Cajun Navy, among others. And the methods tell you how seriously it was taken. Boats swept the Mississippi Sound in patterns. Aircraft traced grids overhead. Ground teams walked the dunes and marsh on foot, terrain so unstable in places that searchers noted some interior spots would have been nearly impossible to reach barefoot. They checked anyway. Water searches are their own discipline, and it's worth understanding why they take time. Crews don't just look where a person was last seen. They model where the water has moved since. Tide tables, current patterns, wind. A search area on open water isn't a fixed spot. It's a moving calculation that has to be rerun hour after hour. 2 full days of that, across an island and the sound around it, is not a slow search. It's a thorough one, fighting an environment that never stops shifting. And while the boats ran their patterns, something else was spreading, faster than any search grid. Nolan's photo, under 3 words. Bring Nolan home. Classmates shared it. Teammates shared it. Total strangers drove in from other parts of the state, offering their own boats and their own weekend to a family they'd never met. Whatever else this story becomes, hold on to that image too, because before this case divided anyone, it moved an entire coastline to help. Quick pause here. If you're the kind of viewer who wants what's verified instead of what's viral, that's exactly what this channel is for. We update every case the moment new facts are confirmed, and not a moment before. Subscribe so you don't miss where this one lands, because it isn't over. Part 6, Monday morning. The search ran through the weekend without pause. Then, just before 9 on Monday morning, July 6th, it ended. A National Park Service ranger, moving along the shoreline near the northwest end of Horn Island, spotted something in the water. It was Nolan. He was found just offshore, near the same stretch of beach where he'd been seen talking with the young woman 2 days earlier. The machinery of the search stood down, and a different machinery started. A state autopsy was conducted the next day, July 7th, at the Mississippi Medical Examiner's office. And here is where this case enters the phase it is still in as of this recording. The cause and manner of death were not announced. They were pending toxicology, laboratory results that routinely take weeks. Weeks, remember that word. Because the internet was about to fill those weeks with something other than patience. Part 7. 2 stories form. Sheriff John Ledbetter's office stated its position plainly. Investigators did not suspect foul play, and they believed Nolan's death was an accidental drowning. For some people, that settled it. For Nolan's family, it did the opposite. Their question was simple. How could anyone sound that certain, that fast, before the autopsy results were even in? So they acted. The family retained Ben Crump, one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, and they commissioned something most grieving families never have the resources to pursue: an independent autopsy, conducted in Washington, D.C., outside Mississippi's jurisdiction entirely, performed by an examiner with no ties to any local agency. The funding came from former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. It's worth pausing on what an independent autopsy actually is, because it gets misread constantly. It is not an accusation. It's a second, parallel examination, a way for a family to know that whatever conclusions are eventually announced, they'll have findings of their own to measure them against. Families pursue them for one reason: trust. And trust, in this case, was already running thin. Understand the context that made it thinner. Nolan was black. The friends he'd gone out with were not. And this was Mississippi, a state whose history makes "just trust the process" a heavier ask than it might be somewhere else. Crump invoked that history openly. None of that context proves anything about what happened on Horn Island, but it explains, honestly, why this case did not stay local. It explains why a drowning investigation off one county's coast became a story the entire country was suddenly watching. And from that moment, this stopped being one story. It became 2, running in parallel: an active death investigation and a public referendum on whether the official version could be trusted. What happened next is the part most coverage gets wrong, and it's the reason this case is worth telling carefully. Part 8. The machine starts. Here's what happens when millions of people are handed a mystery and told the answers are weeks away. They don't wait. The silence between official updates doesn't stay silent. It gets filled. And in this case, it got filled fast. TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, a flood of theories, screenshots, and secondhand claims, each one more confident than the last. So let's do what almost none of that flood did. Let's take the loudest claims in this case, one at a time, and put them next to what actually checked out. Claim 1, the phone. The suspicious version spread everywhere. A teenager goes missing, and his phone comes home with his friends. On its face, that sounds damning. What 18-year-old is ever separated from his phone? Now the verified version. The phone was found on one of the boats and returned to his mother. And people who know that water offered an explanation so ordinary it barely traveled at all. Leaving your phone in a boat console is standard practice when you're swimming in salt water, especially at an island where there's no cell service to use it anyway. Salt water kills phones. Everyone who boats out there knows it. Attorney Crump has argued the separation is still suspicious, and Nolan's mother has said something that deserves to be heard on its own terms. When she went through that phone, she found none of the photos and videos her son took everywhere he went. An absence that to her didn't match the boy she raised. That's her account, publicly given, and it's part of this record. So hold both readings honestly. One requires wrongdoing. One requires a swim. The phone by itself cannot tell you which, and anyone online who told you it could was selling certainty they didn't have. Claim 2, the video. A clip went viral almost immediately. Chaotic holiday footage from the island, and on it, a voice in an argument demanding a phone back. Millions of people heard it and reached the same conclusion. This was Nolan, in a confrontation, in his final hours. For a stretch of days, that clip was the single most shared piece of evidence in the entire case. Then a friend named Trayston Shepard came forward and identified himself as the person in the video. The altercation was his, with a stranger, unrelated to Nolan. By this account, Nolan wasn't involved. He wasn't even present when it happened. Let that one land. The loudest piece of evidence in the case, the clip that convinced millions, pointed at nothing. And here's the part worth remembering long after this video ends. The correction never travels as far as the claim. The people who saw the clip number in the millions, the people who saw the clarification, a fraction. Which means right now there are still people out there certain they heard Nolan's final argument, in a video he wasn't in. Claim 3, the photo. A photo circulated showing Nolan at a pool party, presented as an image from the weekend he died. One last glimpse of him in his final days. It spread with exactly the emotional weight you'd expect. Friends who were actually there clarified, the photo was from a different party, on June 27th. A week earlier, it had nothing to do with that weekend at all. A 7-day error, traveling as fact, because it felt true, and feeling true is all a post needs. Claim 4, the rumors. This is the category that forced investigators to do something agencies rarely do mid-investigation: publicly address specific internet claims. Rumors of torture, rumors of sleeping pills. Detailed, horrifying, confident, and unverified. Nothing in the released record supports them. They existed because a vacuum existed, and vacuums like this one always get filled by whoever speaks with the most confidence. Now step back and look at the 4 of them together. A phone with an innocent explanation nobody wanted to hear. A video that turned out to star someone else entirely. A photo from the wrong week. Rumors invented outright. Every single one traveled faster than its correction. That's not a side detail of this case. That is the engine of it. If this breakdown is the kind of coverage you want, claims tested instead of repeated, this is the moment to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and it means you'll be here when the verified answers in this case finally land. Part 9. Who pays for certainty? Because here's what the theory machine costs, and it isn't abstract. Members of Nolan's friend group received death threats. Teenagers, uncharged, unaccused by any investigating authority, publicly defending themselves against an internet that had already delivered its verdict, while the actual investigation hadn't delivered any verdict at all. Some of them retained attorneys, and even that got held against them. Read online as an admission of guilt. It's worth saying clearly, a lawyer for a minor whose name is circulating nationally in connection with a death is not a confession. It's what any responsible parent does the moment their child becomes a subject of mass speculation. It protects a scared teenager from saying something in panic or grief that gets twisted, the way nearly everything in this case had already been twisted. And this is where the racial context of the case deserves careful, honest handling, because it cuts in more than one direction. The family's distrust is not paranoia. It's rooted in real history and a real pattern of cases where families like theirs were told to stop asking questions. That deserves respect. And at the same time, the answer to a history of injustice cannot be manufacturing new certainties out of debunked clips and misdated photos, because every fake claim that collapses makes the family's real questions easier for the world to dismiss. The family's legitimate questions deserve better than the rumors that buried them. Both of those things are true at once. Holding them together is the entire discipline this case demands. Part 10. What's genuinely still open? So strip it all away. Everything that collapsed. Everything that was never verified. And ask what actually remains. Because real questions do remain, and they're more serious than any rumor. The cause and manner of death are still pending toxicology. The independent autopsy results have not been made public. Until both land, nobody, not the sheriff's office, not the family's team, not anyone online, actually knows how Nolan Wells died. Everything currently said about it is a working belief, not a finding. The timeline still has a hole at its center. Between the last confirmed sighting in mid-afternoon and the recovery 2 mornings later, there is a gap nobody has reconstructed. What he did. Where on the island he was. Who else was there after his group left? Whether, and when, and how he entered the water. A finished investigation is supposed to close those gaps. This one hasn't yet. And the accounts still don't align. The friends say he stayed for a girl. The girl reportedly says she didn't know him, and they'd already parted ways. 2 descriptions of the same afternoon that cannot both be complete. That contradiction isn't internet noise. It's a genuine investigative loose end, and it deserves a genuine answer. Notice what his parents have actually asked for, because it's been consistent from the first press conference on. They have not accused anyone by name. They have not pushed a theory. Their position is narrower and harder to argue with. The story we were given does not match the son we raised. And until someone explains that gap in a way that holds together, we will not stop asking. Part 11. Where it stands. As of this recording, here is the complete, honest status. No one has been arrested. No one has been charged. The case remains an active investigation, officially treated as a suspected accidental drowning, pending the final results. The state autopsy is done. Its conclusions wait on toxicology. The independent autopsy is done, its findings have not been released. And there is movement. The Jackson County District Attorney was scheduled to meet with Nolan's family for the first time on July 15th, the family's most direct contact with prosecutors since this began. Whatever comes out of that room will shape everything that follows. Authorities are still asking for one thing from the public, and it's worth repeating in their spirit. Original, unedited photos and video from Horn Island on July 4th. First-hand material, not screenshots of screenshots, not reposts. If you were there, what's sitting in your camera roll may matter more than every theory ever posted about this case combined. Close from M. Here's what this case leaves you with. A family with legitimate questions and an autopsy still unresolved. A friend group cleared of nothing and accused of everything. A video that starred someone else. A photo from the wrong week. Rumors so loud that investigators had to formally deny them. And running underneath all of it, one quiet, stubborn fact. Nobody actually knows yet. And everyone who claimed to was wrong at least once already. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was days from a season he'd spent years working toward. He went to a beach on a holiday with people he trusted, and he was expected home that night. Whatever the final findings say, that part will never change. And the people who loved him are owed the one thing no amount of engagement can generate: verified answers. Maybe that's the real lesson this case leaves behind, that how we handle not knowing says as much about us as the truth eventually will. Sometimes the most honest sentence available is also the hardest one to sit with. We don't know yet. We'll stay on this one. The toxicology. The independent autopsy. Whatever comes out of the family's meeting with the district attorney, the moment there's something verified to tell you, you'll hear it here, and not a moment before, because this family deserves accuracy more than anyone deserves speed. Before you go, we'd genuinely like to hear from you. Of everything still open, the autopsy results, the unexplained gap in the timeline, or the accounts that still don't match, which one do you think holds the answer to this case? Tell us in the comments. We read all of them, and more than once, what a viewer noticed has shaped what we cover next. If you want evidence over rumor as this develops, subscribe and turn on notifications. Anyone can post a theory, but we'd rather bring you the truth once it's actually known. And if this video helped you see this case more clearly, share it with someone who's only seen the viral version. Corrections never travel as far as claims. Help this one travel. If you have original, unedited photos or video from Horn Island on July 4th, contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office directly. Until next time, stay careful with what you share, stay compassionate with the people inside these stories, and never stop asking for the truth.